All right, welcome back to Beyond the Protocol. And I'm
Yeah.
so excited to have my guest here with us. I have Denise Bronner, who is the founder of Empactful Ventures and a leader in our industry. I'm just going to say you are the leader and you're intersecting science, equity, and strategy in
Yeah.
impactful ways. So you're just 360 degree. I love it. And I'm super happy to welcome you to the show today.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. I mean, honestly, it's weird when you actually look back at all the areas that I get involved in. I'm like, my God, I'm in a lot of stuff, right? But it
I
makes
love
sense. Like,
it. It
like
does.
most people look at it and go, well, how does this all mix in? I'm like, it all
It
makes
does all
sense.
fit together. It does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I always like to do a little research on my guests. And I noticed that you love Legos. And I was like,
Oh,
that is so spot on because I
yeah.
feel like even though, like you just said, you kind of have your hand in many things, they fit together and you're just building an empire over here. So I
Listen,
want to
you
dig
should
into that today.
listen. Legos are my thing that is like my pastime. And since I don't have kids, I'm like, I get to spend my money on crazy things. And I was going through and counting the number of sets that I have. And in one room alone, I have 10. So, and in the other rooms, I'm like, I know there's at least another
There's
10
more.
to
There's more.
15 at
Oh yeah, I
least.
live
So,
the Lego dream. I have two boys, and both of them seem to be future engineers, and they're all about Legos and the
oh
amount
my
of
God,
money that I have invested. So I totally understand.
it's a lot.
So let's dig in. I would love for you to just kind of introduce yourself and
Yeah.
let's talk about your journey from kind of the bench over
Yeah.
to clinical innovation in our industry.
Oh man. So I am originally from Detroit, Michigan. So I'm a Midwest girl. And I knew
Me
at the
too.
age of 14 that I wanted to get a PhD. So, and it was only because of I had a black male science teacher who was teaching us about, the microscopic world. And to me, I was like, wait a minute, you're telling me bacteria and viruses, something that you can't see, can
Me.
take down humans and some of the largest animals on this
Mhm.
planet. I was really intrigued that they could live in these very extreme areas. So I was like, this is fascinating. And yet we still have some bacteria that are good to us that live in our
Right.
gut. So that just blew my mind. And so I, went in, did my undergrad, was able to join into the IMSD program where I did undergraduate research for years.
Mhm.
And I applied to grad school. And I remember I didn't have much microbiology experience besides just a class. And so when I applied to the microbiology and immunology program at University of Michigan, it was interesting that the committee who was reviewing applications said she doesn't have a lot of microbiology experience, so why should we bring her into the
Mhm.
program? But out of the incoming class, I had the most research experience we had
Research.
ever seen. So they brought me in for an interview, and that's when they saw how passionate I was. So did grad school. At the end of it, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to become a professor. And so, but they didn't really talk about careers outside of the ivory tower. It
No.
was kind of
Mm-mm.
taboo, right? And they're like, if you go in the industry, you're going to the dark side. I was like, that doesn't sound too bad, but
Right?
right, I might make a little bit more money. But at the time, I didn't really know. So I did an academic postdoc out at UC Davis. And that's when I got introduced to the world of business through a business development fellowship. So they would
Wow.
take PhD students and postdocs and bring them into the world of business through a few business classes. And that's what just blew my mind because I was like, wait a minute. You have a bunch of people who are going to business school who are leading companies and investing in ideas, and they have no scientific
No
background.
science background. Mm-hmm.
It kind of concerned me. And the idea that being a person with a PhD, that you can't really make that transition because you're too technical, you lack the social skills. I was like, I got to challenge that. So I did the Big Bang business competition, came up with this idea of taking spent grain and turning it into a nutritious snack, won all kinds of money. And I said, if I
Mm.
can do it with this, I
You
can
know
go
you
off.
can do it. Yeah.
I can do it.
Career
So
out of
did a little
this.
bit of consulting because that's like the easiest way of transitioning out of
Mm-hmm.
academia. Did that for a year, worked on, large pharma companies and their feasibility programs, helping them to understand how to do better with site selection and patient
Yes.
identification. And then ended up being headhunted by one of my clients, J&J. So I got pulled in at the height of the pandemic, which a lot of
Oh,
people were like, wait a minute, you changed in the height of the pandemic. Why would you switch jobs? And I was like, I need to go. And made that jump, worked in their feasibility center of excellence, and then transitioned over to their DEI and clinical trials
mm.
team because when I was working in feasibility, we were looking at recruitment, trends
You
being
noticed
screened.
some things. You noticed
Yeah,
some
I'm like,
things.
I was like,
Yeah.
we are missing a lot of representation.
Hmm.
So why are we not using data more effectively to find
Right.
these types of patients?
Yes.
And I started working with the DEICT team, and they were like, wait, where's all this data coming from? It's like, it's from feasibility. So create a whole framework on how these teams can work better together, transitioned over to that role. And then from there, worked there for 3 years and completely changed the immunology portfolio from being maybe we would have some patients to being highly representative. I mean, our IBD studies had 35 to 40% of non-white patients. That's never been seen
That's
before.
amazing. Yeah,
We did
that's amazing.
100% skin of color psoriasis trial. We had, rheumatoid arthritis trials that were 30%, representation of non-white. So we were really changing how things worked.
Yeah.
But I said, this is only one company. Is there a way for me to do this across the industry and to work with more vendors, especially startups, who are focused in this area and help them get better access to pharma?
Yes.
So pivoted out, did Empactful Ventures, and here I am a whole year
There you
later.
are. I love it. I love it. It's amazing how we make this so difficult. And I have so many conversations, and like you said, they were like, "How'd you get the data?" And I'm like, "It's right here. You have
Yeah,
tons of data. You just don't use it in a way that would make sense to help
yeah,
increase the representation in our trials." And it's so many different sides to it, right?
yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's still quite simple. It
It
really
is.
is. Yeah.
It is. Yeah,
So, all right. So I also want to touch on, I know it's just a theme for many of us, representation and really advocating for that from the perspective and viewpoint that each of us has.
yeah,
And you don't have to be Black American, you don't have to be brown. Everyone should take this flag, right? And
yeah,
help push this advocacy forward, because it matters. If you're a true scientist and you care about humans, right? Then you
yes,
you
yes,
pick this up and you carry it in the way that you know how. So I would love for you to share a bit of the personal side of why
yeah,
clinical trials and representation matters, because I know you and your father had a journey where
yeah,
this was very impactful, right?
yeah, yeah.
For the outcome for his journey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you think about this. I feel like, and it's very obvious that when the term DEI comes up, most people immediately think of race and ethnicity. And it's such a disservice because it's not just that. Yes, we do have low representation of Black, Hispanic, and Asian individuals in trials, but it's also looking at it by age, by comorbidities, all these
Mhm.
different things that make a person who they are. And it's
Yes.
sad that when a person goes to the doctor and the doctor's prescribing them something, and they ask the doctor, well, how do you know that this will work for someone like me? And the doctor can't answer that question. They're like, well, you're right. And so when I think about my own dad as he was going through his journey, when he first was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, he didn't present in the classical sense. So
Mhm.
typically people are showing signs of, where you're looking at this going, well, okay, we might see, some fatigue, you might see, you know, um, there you're looking at certain blood results or blood panels, you're seeing certain things kind of spiking and things not.
Right.
He wasn't showing that. What he had shown was just congestive heart failure. And this was some man who was still in shape, who was just entering in early retirement. And you're looking at him and you're going, did this make any sense? Why are you showing signs of congestive heart failure where he was having some water buildup and he was having shortness of breath? And we went to the urgent care and they were like, dude, you have a lot of fluid. in your chest cavity. You need to go to the doctor. And I will never forget how the emergency room treated my dad. They were
Mm.
constantly asking him, well, are you sure you didn't have a heart attack? We're like, no, we know that for a fact. They're like, well, are you on any drugs? Because, it'll come up in the panels. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
thinking, I'm sorry, the person just told you no, and you keep
Mm.
asking 3 to 4 times. So when we finally got transitioned out of emergency care to the cardiology unit, that doctor, I will never forget, Dr. Kursawani, really sat and listened to my dad. And he says, I agree with you. Something just doesn't seem right because you're not
Mm.
showing signs of a heart attack. You're in shape. I
Right.
don't understand. He's like, I have some ideas, but I need to keep you here to do some tests.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we were in the hospital for a whole week. So my dad had the whole gambit of, a bone marrow biopsy. He had, all kinds of scans and imaging done
Hmm.
with different dyes. And it came back that, okay, you have multiple myeloma. And my dad's like, what is that? So again, level of awareness. And the doctor went through and explained it. It's a blood cancer. This is what typically happens, but you're not showing in the classical
Showing that.
sense.
Hmm.
So we're lucky to have found it when we did. But it has done some damage to your heart. So now we had to go through the process of going through chemo. And of course, it's a standard, regimen of chemo. And he went into remission, but then COVID hit. And
Mm.
so you can't really go to the hospital to go get your blood work done because it's taken over by COVID. So a few years went by, a couple years, and then we went back to do a checkup. It had come back again. He had
Mhm.
relapsed. So, but now what was on the market was a new drug called Darzalex. And so we were like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and they had a new version of it where you could do just a simple injection and not have to do IV.
Right.
And I was talking to his oncologist at the time, and I said, I don't want him to do the IV or infusion because it's a lot of fluid that's going to be putting on him. And his heart is already in an
Right.
advanced state. And the doctor's like, I agree with you, but I have to deal with insurance. So, but when we were
Mm.
talking to him, I was like, well, how do you know it's going to work for someone like him? And he was like, I only have one other patient who has an advanced stage of congestive heart failure like your father, but he's an old white guy who's in his 80s.
Mm.
So there wasn't even data in the trial that reflected patients of my dad's race, there was some of his age, but not
Yeah.
of the comorbidity that he had of congestive heart failure. So this was where we were going in, and the doctor was like, I have to tell you, when you go on it, you have to tell me how this makes you feel. He says, I'm
Hmm.
not. He's like, so if it's not making you feel great, we will stop it. And I like the fact that those two doctors, his oncologist and his cardiologist, listened. They put
Yes.
the humanity and the empathy in it first. But it was a fact that they both said that the research doesn't tell us this, right?
Hmm.
So it was a little concerning that you're going into this blind. So when I hear people say DEI doesn't matter, it's like it does because you as a person, you can be
Hmm.
an older white person, but you may have a comorbidity, right? And you weren't included in the trial. Yet
Yes.
doctors feel it's okay to prescribe you that medication
Hmm.
once it's been approved. So,
Yeah.
and they're not even required for all the therapies that are on the market to do post-marketing, you know,
Right.
research.
Exactly.
So it's like we're not keeping up with that.
No, and you know what just really it just hit me so often, and this is across the board. It's not just in within one demographic where a clinical trial may be offered and people say, "Nope, I don't want to participate in that clinical trial. I don't want to be a test rat, all the
Yeah,
things that come up." But what you saying that just made me realize that oftentimes we are still research participants and we don't even realize it because even though it's been
exactly.
approved, if we weren't part of that trial or someone like us with our comorbidities and all the things that make us us, then we're taking that and we are truly. But the bad
Yeah,
thing about that is what happens to us may never be reported. And the benefit for someone else to not have to go through what we did because that drug didn't work for us or it did have adverse events and down the road,
yeah,
um, we lost the benefit of that information. And
early.
so all
Exactly.
are research participants, one way or the other, whether you consented to it or you're taking the drug after it's approved. Yeah. And
Exactly.
that's
And
the
I don't,
importance of education, right?
yeah, people don't
Yeah.
understand that this is why you see recalls happening where they're like, we're having adverse events because now it's in the population and
Yes.
you're starting to
Yeah.
see, oh,
What's
we're
happening in
seeing
real world with everyone taking it now. Yes.
exactly. So now
Yes.
you're starting to see the effects. And when they
Mhm.
pull medications that work for some, but for others
Not
it's causing an adverse
all.
event, now what are those people going to do? Now you
Yes.
have a population that had something work, it's removed, while others could have had this prevented and not have to go through these adverse events because some of
Mhm.
these adverse events can really be quite life altering. And now
Oh,
you're
yeah.
stuck with these issues because it did damage to another organ,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
it's scary when you think about it.
It really is. And can spiral you into uh, a lot of things. And one, I mean, it could spiral you down to death, honestly. Like
Yeah.
we have to think of that when you think of how it can start a domino effect.
Yep.
I've had that experience in my family, and it did lead to death. And so I think it's education and helping everyone to understand it's not a race thing. It just
Yeah.
isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the unseen cost of designing. Like we just talked about what happens from a human perspective, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what are the unseen costs? I love that you work with investment folks that are
Yeah.
investing,
Yeah.
VC. You give them knowledge behind about the unseen cost, not
Yeah.
knowing what you're doing, essentially, investing blindly and not fully understanding how this works. And that I see
Yeah.
that all the time from CEOs leading companies, and they've never been on the bench, they've never been a clinical trial patient, they've never
Yeah.
sat down with ClinOps teams and understood what they do fully. And so let's break down the hidden cost, right? Of
Yeah.
not properly designing trials that are
Oh yeah.
inclusive.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, the hidden cost is really just the fact that, I mean, when you think about the stat that they always put out there about, like, I think they said like 80% of trials never get completed, right? They fail.
Mhm. They fail.
And when you look at the reasoning for it, a lot of times it's due to recruitment. And you think about how expensive it is to run a trial because there's so many moving parts. So it's not just finding a site, it's getting them the equipment, the kits that they
Yes.
need, the materials that they need, the site management that has to happen, the
Mhm.
data integration and collection. It's all these pieces that have to fit
Yes.
together.
All the
And the,
vendor companies that are
and the
behind the
vendors,
scenes to make
right?
this happen for the sites. Yeah.
And when you think about vendors in general, what I've realized with working with a lot of vendors and startups is that they're trying to find the right time to make entry into
Mm.
pharma's sphere of influence to be able to get onto a trial. But if you're unknown and you're not
Mhm.
an approved vendor, you don't really get pulled in, even though you may be filling in an essential gap. And I've
Yes.
noticed way too many times pharma going with well established vendors who are approved, getting the same results and complaining about the lack of ROI and the
Mhm.
cost. And I'm like,
Mhm. And the
try
quality.
someone else,
And the
right?
quality.
Um,
But to vet and qualify a new vendor, it's like we just don't want to deal with that. So we're just going to stick to who we have.
and that's what they do. And I understand it because I had to go through it a few times with new
Mhm.
vendors where you have to go through and do all their data checks and look at their SOPs. It takes a lot of work. But it's like if you do these once a year, once every two
Yes.
year open lot, where you say any new vendor who's never worked with us can come in, do this round of going
Mhm.
through, getting checks and balances, getting everything figured out. Now they're in your system. So now procurement can say we can do a better RFP where now we
Yes.
have more proposals coming in. Yes, it's more companies you have to review, but it's giving better competition for these
Yes.
types of trials. But the problem is, and I hear from a lot of vendors, is we're getting pulled in to rescue. And I'm like, yeah, the house is already on fire. You got pharma coming to you saying, oh
Mhm.
my God, can you help us fix this? And
Mhm.
you're like, I only have 3 months left. What do you
Yeah.
expect me to do?
And these vendors, their model isn't fit for that. Their model is to partner with you from the beginning and put the proper infrastructure in place and have
Yeah.
successful outcomes from that point, not
Yeah.
3 months left in the trial. And
Oh
it's
my God.
unfair. It's not fair
And
to that
even,
vendor.
yeah, and even if you bring them in at the start of the trial, it's still too late
Oh, yeah.
because
Agree.
they're now forced to work within the boundaries that you have set. And
When
if
they
you
could
have a
have
highly
given their
restricted,
expertise
yeah,
early on. Yeah.
prior, you now have
Hmm.
a highly restrictive protocol that it's going to have screen failure rates north of 50% for certain groups. And you're asking them to do the impossible when you
Hmm.
haven't even chosen sites that are in the communities that would allow you to draw from a larger pool. So if you're bringing them in early as strategic thought partners to say,
Yes.
here's how we're thinking about this protocol. What are you hearing from your community? Could we use some people from your community for patient voice to review this? If you have
Yes.
HCPs, can we use them, the real world HCPs, not just
Yes.
KOLs, to say, what are we seeing? Does this make sense? How much of a
Yes.
burden is this going to be? If you did that, you would see more dividends paid down the road. And I've been on trials where we've done that early, where they really did a great job with pulling together a strong advisory board to review this, to invest in vendors, and to invest in materials that were the best for
Mhm.
recruitment, allowing for not only hitting your goals, but you were coming in early. Like the visible
Yes.
study that J&J did, which is 100% skin of color and psoriasis, everyone in the industry was like, that is crazy, overly ambitious. You typically don't see that. 90% of psoriasis trials, like 90% of the participants are white. You're now trying to say you're trying to do 100% non white. But they brought together a beautiful advisory board made up of key dermatologists who
Mhm.
partnered with the Skin of Color Society to come in and review this protocol to provide insights. They chose the right sites. And when they rolled out, they were screening at such an accelerated rate that the kits that needed to be delivered, they were not able to keep
Couldn't
up right
even
away.
keep up. Couldn't even keep up. Yeah.
They came in 3 months ahead of schedule.
Hmm.
And for the first time ever, you had beautiful representation across all six Fitzpatrick skin tones for a trial. Never
It's
heard of
not
that.
unheard of. It's just strategy
Yeah,
and removing the barriers that it cannot be done,
yeah,
right? And so,
yeah,
oh, it can't be done. We just have to keep business as usual and continue to do it the way we've always known. And
yep,
that's what frustrates me about this industry that I love is that no, there is a better way. There's a new way. Embrace it and let's be successful and get an outcome that doesn't look like what we always get. Um, yeah, it's just baffling and mind blowing to me. 22 years in, it
yeah,
still gets under my skin and just bugs me like none other. But I think the other thing that I want to say that you hit on is the importance of community engagement. And I saw a post on LinkedIn yesterday from someone that I admire, and I've spent some time with her, and she does the real deal grassroots community efforts. And
yeah,
it's not fair when we just go in and use the community for our gain and then we're gone
yeah.
when you
Oh, yeah,
really have to make the investment. And it's not just a monetary investment, it's time, it's commitment, it's showing that you are trustworthy as an industry and a company to go into the communities that we need the representation from and to
yeah,
really partner and get the feedback and bring them in early, like you said, to be part of the protocol design and the physicians and to let them be investigators so that we have proper access to the populations and they can really make sure that the protocol in the trial is a benefit to their patients, right? And it's not just
yeah,
gain for our industry. And so
yeah.
I think that's such a key part is the community engagement. And we miss
Oh, yeah.
that so many times.
Yeah, I've had so many times where I was in conversations with colleagues within the organization and they were trying to understand why, like when we're talking about awareness, they're like, there is no direct ROI when it comes to recruitment. And I said, how do you figure? Like, well, when we're talking about raising awareness, we're doing all these events and things, but what are we actually going to see any type of impact on our trial? And
Right.
I'm like, you have to understand every time you go in cold into a community, you are starting from the bare minimum, right? You're starting from nothing. and then you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to warm them up too quickly
Yes.
and get them into your trial. And you go, but you cannot do that. If you have sustained engagement with communities,
Mm-hmm.
now they're listening to you because you have
Yes.
empowered them with information to help them on their
Mm-hmm.
healthcare journey. So it's not just your trial. You're saying, do you even know what the symptoms are for this condition?
Mm-hmm.
Because
You
I
are.
bet you, right, you are probably exhibiting some symptoms and you don't even know it.
You don't even
How do you have
realize it.
that conversation with your doctor?
Yeah.
Showing them how to do that, pointing them in the right direction, giving them the resources that they need before you sell is so important. That's why a lot of these vendors who are coming into the space, you're going, you have to have awareness.
Yes. Yes.
But how do you translate that? And you have to talk about, well, what are going to be those KPIs, those metrics? That's the key piece that I think is missing. And you're starting to see this change now because when DEI took off in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who are in it, they're like, this was nothing new. But in 2020,
Right.
everybody swung. So
Right.
all this money, all these projects, and you're like, but what were the KPIs and metrics? 2 to 3 years later, people start saying DEI fatigue. Now we're in
Mm-hmm.
2025, and at the end of 2024, you were seeing these massive pullbacks on budget. You were seeing vendors being extremely hard
Mm-hmm.
pressed on metrics because they were getting it from higher ups. And now
Yes.
you're going, well, how are you tying this back to business? And I have always said, if you're not showing how you're saving time, money, increasing their money, or customer pool, you're not going to show any type of impact and they're not going to
Yeah.
pay attention.
And it's not going to go far at all. And it
No.
can easy, and that's how it's been so easy to just nix it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's why.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. I think we could spend so much time, so much time um, on this. So I think at the end of the day, it is a business advantage for
Yeah.
inclusion, but that's not the sole reason why we do this. We're not
Exactly.
just checking a compliance box, and I think that's what's so critical for everyone to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes I call it business selfishness, where we're
Yes.
so
Yes.
self-centered on what we need. But if we truly embody patient first, then the community engagement and becoming a trusted partner of the people that we want to bring into our trials shouldn't it's not that heavy of a lift, right?
No.
If
No.
we truly embody that and live that. And so I think I like that even though we're in the same industry, but we kind of on different sides, right? Different
Yeah.
approaches. We arrive at that same kind of this is the end goal. I love that.
Exactly.
Every time this is where we end.
Yeah.
And it does come back to patients first.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. It really does. I think you have to keep patients in the center, but you have to do it in an intentional way.
Yes.
And what I've realized, and I was just talking about this with another client, is you have to, when we think about DEI, it's always been from a very altruistic point of view. It's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
You have been underrepresented or you have been overlooked, underserved. And it's always coming from a very disadvantaged point of view. And I said, why don't we flip it on its head and say that there's actual value add? That
Yes.
if you are using and having a proper amount of representation, you have enriched the scientific knowledge and data that can inform your asset portfolio, that can give you a competitive edge on marketing.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you think about the fact that you're pulling these people into your trials now, you now have the evidence to convince them when it becomes commercially available. You have
Yes.
there's a lot of business pieces. It can get you with your trials done faster. You have a competitive advantage. You may find out that you have something that completely changes another condition or disease. Now you have the ability to expand the label. But this
Yes.
is where it's coming from in the data. So I think if people started putting it in that context and not just being underserved or overlooked, you start to tie it
Yes.
value to it. And I
Yeah.
said, you need to tell even your community members that you are influencing multi-billion-dollar business decisions. Let them know the value that they bring so that they're
Mhm.
more willing to lean in on
Yes. I think that is an
it.
absolutely excellent viewpoint. I like that. Taking away the disadvantage and really focusing in on the advantages.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So I'm gonna move towards wrapping this up, and I just have to ask you, because I live in the ClinOps world, and I know that you work with leadership and C-suite
Yeah.
executives and investors and all the things. Then because operations is the heart, right, of clinical
Yeah.
trials,
Yeah.
and so if you could give a message to leadership, right?
Mm.
Um, what would you say in terms of building trials that respect the complexity? Even just this very brief conversation we've had, we've touched on so many different
Yeah.
sides
Yeah.
of clinical operations and trials. So
Yeah.
what would that message be?
I think the biggest thing is open up your pocketbook, right? Because we have to, I mean, I've looked at when we would pull in certain vendors, and you're looking at what the costs or what their proposed budget would be compared to others. And I'm like, why are we not distributing the funds a little bit more? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for this one type of vendor who can do everything from end to end, and that's just not possible. Why don't you break it up, but give a good amount of money to your study teams to do the work that they need to do effectively? Why don't we try to think about novel ways of pulling in different types of sites? And they always say, well, it's contracting, its length of time takes too long. It's like, figure out a way to fix that, right? Because you are literally going to the same well every time expecting more
Mm-hmm.
water to come out. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not being replenished. So my thing
No.
is like with leadership, listen to your teams, right? Stop and listen to the teams that are actually doing the work and telling you this is what we need, right?
Yes.
Instead of trying to be so lean because you're trying to increase your profits. It's like at the end of the day, yeah, you may increase it for a little bit, but imagine the amount of returns that you could have if you did more. And I remember talking to leadership one time where I showed them, without you guys doing anything, non-whites make up 15 to 17% of your market share right now, right? Of your customer base. And that's you guys not doing anything. If you increase that just by a mere 2 to 3%, because
Mm.
you've shown them with the trial, this is what that could lead to in profits. It was insane. It's like,
Yeah.
so tying it back in, that investment that you're putting in now is going to give you greater dividends down the road. So
It will.
invest, listen, and really fully support the teams that are working on this stuff.
Yeah. Lean in and trust your experts.
You have
Your
to.
experts are sitting right here next to you, and they
Exactly.
just need the resources to make it happen. I love
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I think we could do this probably for another 4 hours and still be going. But
Exactly.
I really
Exactly.
appreciate you stopping in and having this discussion. I think it's really important. And I'm hopeful that people will really take it to heart and put themselves in the shoes, right? And
Yeah.
what is their role? And do you have the ability to increase the resources? Do you have the ability to lead teams better and allow them to be the experts and to
Yeah.
share what they know to make things better and get better outcomes quickly?
Yeah.
We don't have to
Yeah.
keep doing the same things over and over again, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the day, patience first. And it's personal because
Very
we
personal.
all do. We all have family members or are individually impacted, right?
Correct.
By just
Correct.
getting it right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Denise. I appreciate
No.
you.
No, thanks for having me.